What so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
I'd like to invite Ron Langrell up to invite all of you attendees to his campus and say a few words.
You know, I was supposed to sing this morning. Just appreciate her standing in, you know. I'm going to start developing some other opinions about the center table here. So welcome to Bates Technical College. Alan, how you doing? Good to see you. Alan is the best example I have of not being able to get into the University of Idaho, so you go to work for Washington State University. Two great institutions. I have to say that, it's my alma mater. And WSU is one of a kind. Building an energized future. Wow, how about some action words? Building. There's action in that. Construction trades, right? Energized. That's not energy. That's energized. That's bringing your A game. In the future, rarely do we take a day and talk about the future of any sector or pathway, let alone the two we're going to talk about today. And if you hear those bagpipes, it's my colleagues in Minnesota. As they undergo budget cuts, wave goodbye. 4 out of 5 centers of excellence. Wave, everybody. Everybody wave. Well, what the hell are we doing here celebrating our 11th year if they're going out of business in Minnesota? They didn't energize, they didn't build, they didn't look to the future. Look this 360 center at Bemidji up. They did. They're going to be the surviving center. But they're focused on the same topics you are. But how does an allied health initiative die in Rochester, Minnesota, home of the Mayo Clinic? How does an engineering initiative die in the Twin Cities, right in the middle where the action is? It dies because there's no focus on a preferred future and what it takes to get there, the incremental steps. I want to compliment the partners, labor, management, employers, workers, labor and non-labor, apprentices, those in our training and education programs. I want to compliment those that weren't with us 10, 11 years ago. My Walla Walla and my Riverland Community College have started 2 new wind energy programs, all in the last 11 years, all since 2005. It's pretty amazing the changes in our industry. What is that preferred future? What are we getting energized around? 2 things have happened since my arrival in Pierce County in 2012. The number of trucks stacked up out here on Interstate 5 has tripled, coming in and out of this world-class port. And the number of orange day glow green and orange shirts have gone from 1 in 20 cars at coming home time to 1 in 3 or 1 in 4. I was in Beijing 6 months ago. There are 2 to 3 cranes on each building. Coming home from Bellevue through Seattle, by golly, we've got 10 or 15 in downtown Seattle. And do you know Bellevue's now bigger than downtown Seattle? A lot's changed in 11 years. What are we doing? Where's our focus? What's energizing us? What are we doing for the preferred future of the construction trades and energy, be it traditional or alternative? Well, that's what today's activity is about. And you're on that forefront. You're making that happen. But when the hell did fire become an energy issue? When did politics become an energy issue? When did pollution become a construction and energy issue? When did fish and oil and our relationships around the world change? All because we decided we wouldn't just let those oil fields in North Dakota rest. We'd put them to work. The simple reality is the change we're undergoing is exponential. And on our best day, as we hold on for dear life, our preferred future is probably antiquated. But I ask you this, where would we be had we not drawn that line? Either as a college, as an industry, as a labor organization, as a training center, as an employer, as a bureau leader, either at a regional, a state, a county, a local level. These are our emerging pieces of the puzzle, and the puzzle picture is changing as we energize ourselves and build the puzzle and rebuild the puzzle. The death of the other 4 centers in the state of Minnesota put that puzzle behind glass, hung it on the wall, and forgot about it. And they're out of business. You're here. You're in business. And that's a huge thing. So, I guess I just say this. What is the future? I think for you, we better get busy. I think it's grade schools, middle schools, and high schools. I think it's expanding the pipeline. I think it's the curriculum that goes with the bleeding edge practices that are emerging. I think it's the recombining of existing activity. I'm in southern Minnesota. You recombine your relationship with IBEW out of Rochester, your industrial maintenance program, your construction electrician program, and you add wind turbine technology, but you don't stop there, you do solar, and you create a memorandum of understanding with the labor organization. You get that pipeline full, agreeing to help with the training and education in those 3 programs, and you even cut a deal where in 3 years you can get 3 degrees, combining those 3 areas of focus. And oh, by the way, when things get slow, you can work on solar. The other thing is, look around the room. No, look around the room. For those of us who still have hair, my 11-year-old asked me, Dad, are you coloring your hair? I said, no, honey, this is just the gray hair you've given me in the last 11 years. 11 years old. God love her. Someone has to. The simple reality is we're graying. I didn't do that for fun. I did that because when I was in my 20s, I liked going up and down those towers. And when I hit my 30s, I liked doing that training and sticking a little closer to the ground. And when I hit my 40s, I liked doing that residential and commercial electrical. And when I hit my 50s, I needed that supervision and that management training as I led my peers when I worked in those industries and professions related to engineering, energy, and construction. So the future, more curriculum, different curriculum. We love our curriculum. I'm still giving Barbara a bad time about that energy systems technology portfolio we did and the skill standards in Walla Walla. It's antiquated and relevant at the same time. Have a divorce. In addition to deciding where you're going today, make a commitment to me. Commit to me that you'll walk away from something you're doing right now that you know is counterproductive and is stuck in where we've been, not where we are or where we're going. Make room for the new. Energize yourself. Build something today. Go somewhere tomorrow. Thank you. Welcome to Bates Technical College.
On behalf of the Centralia College Board of Trustees, I would like to welcome you to the 11th Annual Best Practices Summit put on by the Center of Excellence for Construction and the Northwest Center of Excellence of Clean Energy. There we go. The reason I stumble over that is I worked for that center, was it been 5 or 6 years ago, Barb? Maybe more? Yeah, it's been more because I think I've been a trustee that long. And it was the Center of Excellence for Energy Technology. And I got to work for as a project manager for a grant called Wired. And being a product of the 60s, I thought, oh, I know how to do that. Wired, that's pretty cool. Well, it turned out to be something totally different. I actually had to work and try to put some stuff together for workforce training. The roles of the Center of Excellence are really critical to Washington State. In 2004, the State Board established the Center of Excellence concept, and different colleges got to vie to house one of those centers of excellence. And at Centralia College, we were fortunate enough to get the Center of Excellence for Energy. Barbara's done a great job of building that program. Shauna had the advisory board members raise their hands. It's a really critical key part of what makes a Center of Excellence actually operate. The Center of Excellence were based on what were the major industries in Washington State and how do we improve workforce training and make sure that students are successful when they graduate from that college. And that's one of the critical things that Joe Dolezal, my counterpart at Centralia, another trustee. Joe, stand up. He's such a handsome guy. And he's an optometrist, so if you can't see him, talk to him about it. He'll fix you right up. Anyway, the advisory board at the Center of Excellence for Energy plays a really critical role in how we develop workforce training issues at colleges around the state on the issue of energy. The Centers of Excellence don't just work for our college. They help community colleges across the state establish programs to make sure that those students are successful in being able to obtain a job when they get done, which is really critical. That's what we're all about as community and technical colleges. There's been a new bill passed through the Senate at least, at the national level around energy. And it's extremely exciting because it deals with a bunch of different issues around energy that, like addressing the grid, which is somewhat out of date for some of the new technology we have coming up in energy production. Talks about water in the Yakima River and restoring a salmon run. It covers a lot of different things, but one of the things that excited me the most, and I think it excited Barb as well, is we're actually going to take a look at a national Center of Excellence model to help develop better workforce training programs across the nation for people in this industry, which is really important. We want people to go to our schools, get the kind of training that they really need to be able to be successful and get a job when they get out of school. And I think these concepts are going to make that happen a lot better and a lot faster. I'm going to let Rosa McLeod from Senator Cantwell's office talk a little bit about the bill. I was going to talk a little bit about it, and then I thought, yeah, she probably knows a lot more than I do anyway. Staff people for members of Congress are really important. And the reason I say that, I was one once. I worked for Congresswoman Jolene Unseld for 2.5 years. And basically, they're the eyes and ears of that elected member of Congress. So Rosa has that job here in the, Northwest and South Puget Sound? And that's a tough job. There's a lot of things going on that she has to keep track of. There's a lot of complaints she gets to hear. Every once in a while, a compliment comes through. But she's going to talk to us a little bit about this national legislation and hopefully give us some ideas on what it's going to do to help us in the energy sector nationally.
Good morning. My name is Rosa McLeod. I am the Outreach Director for the South Sound and North Olympic Peninsula for Senator Cantwell. I will be talking a little bit about her big accomplishment and our big win in the Senate from last month. One of Senator Cantwell's main focuses in her work as ranking member of the Energy and Natural Resources Committee, the Energy and Policy Modernization Act, which again just passed in April. This work came out of a partnership with Committee Chair Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, and together the two senators shepherded this bill through the Energy and Natural Resources Committee and the Senate with broad bipartisan support. Senator Cantwell worked diligently to include key provisions that benefit Washington State in the legislation, including saving consumers money on energy costs, providing more options to power U.S. homes and businesses, and definitely preparing the next generation of workers for jobs in clean energy. So for some background, the last time the Senate passed an energy bill, a comprehensive energy bill, was in 2007. And as you know, the energy landscape and technology has seen drastic improvements since then, drastic changes. So the bill is a response to the developments of the last 9 years and to address a continually changing landscape to make sure that U.S. technology and policy keeps pace, which right now we are not in sync with all of these developments. So what is different now in 2016? First of all, the U.S. is now, different than 2007, a leading producer of oil and gas. We have new environmental regulations that are reshaping power systems and electric utilities. And we also have the large expansion of alternate energy sources like wind and solar. For example, to put that into context, wind power has more than quadrupled since the last bill. Solar installations are up nearly 15 times, and the use of LED lights has grown more than 90 times. So the legislation makes important investments in clean energy technologies, energy efficiency, energy workforce, and of course, infrastructure. It also addresses some important environmental issues like permanently extending the Land and Water Conservation Fund, one of our most effective conservation programs. And just as a side note, there are about 23 LWCF programs in Pierce County alone, totaling millions of dollars. So this is a great tool that we use in our conservation efforts. So the work on this legislation started more than a year ago in the Senate Energy Committee on the heels of Secretary Moniz's quadrennial energy review. So this is a review of the nation's energy policy, and Secretary Moniz found that we were at an energy crossroads nationally. Essentially, the dynamic and changing nature of our domestic energy resources, coupled with expanding supplies of natural gas, and growth in distributed generation have changed the playing field, creating both opportunities and challenges that we were not addressing. It also pointed to the importance of investing in a skilled energy workforce, recognizing that new technologies and new landscapes are changing the skill sets in demand for the energy workforce. So right now we are embarking on what Senator Cantwell sees as one of the greatest economic opportunities of this century, the transition to a clean energy economy. Consumers and businesses are demanding new services and new technologies as is government. They want simpler, faster, cleaner, and cheaper products and services, energy products and services that will require a smarter grid, cost-effective energy storage technologies, and a cleaner electric generating portfolio. But these technologies are only as great as the workers who build, install, and maintain them. So that takes me to some of the provisions in the bill that were inspired by the great work done here in Washington State with the Centers of Excellence model. So Secretary Moniz's review highlighted that the U.S. will be in need of an additional 1.5 million new workers in the energy sector over the next 15 years, with a majority of those jobs in construction, installation, maintenance, as well as workers with computer and math skills. It's clear that we need new workforce training programs to help train current workers and new workers on evolving technologies. In addition to the impending skills gap, we are seeing that the energy workforce is also graying. So the average age of a utility worker is 47 years old. And in the Pacific Northwest in particular and across the nation, there will be millions of energy workers who will be retiring, leaving us with a shortage of workers who can do these jobs. With this in mind, Senator Cantwell went to work to develop a new workforce training legislation for the energy sector to help meet this growing demand. She looked at what had been successful here in Washington State and how our model here could be replicated at a national level. So, of course, our Center of Excellence model was first in her mind to serve as a hub for research, training, and development. Senator Cantwell took this model in her legislation and has established a National Center for Excellence for the 21st Century Workforce, a nationwide advisory board focusing on the development of a model energy workforce curriculum. So this Center of Excellence is designed to include representatives from industry, labor, government, and academia to serve as a national leader in the development of specialized energy workforce training and curriculum. Whew, it's a mouthful. So this will seek to align energy job creation with education and training model to fill those jobs and serve as a resource for developing curriculum, developing partnerships, promoting information, and sharing best practices. It also, interestingly, directs assistance to help get more underrepresented groups into the energy sector, as well as develops a plan to support and retrain displaced and unemployed energy sector workers. Senator Cantwell worked with Barbara to develop the Center for Excellence, and Barbara, you were so helpful in highlighting the issues and needs that were so helpful in developing this plan, as well as highlighting the role that community colleges play in developing a skilled energy workforce. So thank you so much, and thank you, Centralia College. The legislation also attempts to provide incentives for industry, community colleges, and labor to work together to develop workforce training programs by establishing a competitive grant program for workforce training. There are a lot of stakeholders in this room today who played an important role in developing this legislation, so I'd like to give a shout out to Pat McCarty from Tacoma Power. Are they here? Oh, hello. Who highlighted the important role veterans can play in our energy workforce. So Senator Cantwell, because of help from Pat, included a provision in grant section to give additional consideration to grant applicants that work with veterans. Veterans possess important skills critical to the energy sector, and of course, we want to harness those exiting soldiers from JBLM, make sure that they stay here. Senator Cantwell would also like to thank IBEW Local 77 for their feedback and support for the Workforce Grant Program, as well as recognizing the unique role that apprenticeships can play in training the next generation of skilled workers. So thank you very much for that. So under this workforce training program of the bill, more than 300,000 individuals over the next 4 years will be able to receive training and take advantage of new energy job opportunities. We always like to highlight these job opportunities are not minimum wage jobs. In fact, in Washington State, you may know, the average salary of a worker in the utility industry is almost $80,000, or 57% higher than the average salary for all workers. So this is clearly a wonderful win. So as we move to make smarter investments, these are going to be the jobs that will drive the economy into the future. So thank you so much to all of our local stakeholders who provided role modeling and advice and feedback for the provisions in this bill. I'm just going to cover a couple of other quick components of the bill aside from the workforce portion. The bill has a provision on smart buildings, and it directs the Secretary of Energy to establish a program to implement smart building technology in federal buildings and then analyze the data and cost effectiveness of these programs to make them more available for other agencies and localities to advance this technology more widely. It also invests in innovation by increasing funding for research and development. Right now, the U.S. ranks 29th among developed nations where federal R&D is concerned, so it ups those amount of dollars. In advanced manufacturing, it supports research into advanced material and new manufacturing processes to help small and medium-sized manufacturers receive technical assistance and implement energy-saving technology, which up until now had been limited to a smaller fraction of companies because of the high cost and increasing complexity. As for grid modernization, the legislation bolsters system resilience by investing in grid-scale storage to help manage demand, and also invest $2 billion into microgrid deployment, new performance metrics, and technical assistance to help states and regions implement these technologies. So again, making it more available to smaller municipalities. As far as cybersecurity, the bill intends to integrate new technologies to optimize our nationwide system, make it more resilient and secure against not only the evolving threat of cybersecurity attacks, but also against natural disasters. The bill also includes provisions that will help local and smaller projects have access to the existing Department of Energy loan program. So that opens up a lot of funding, about $24 billion in funding opportunities that had prior not been available to smaller projects or medium projects because of the complexity of using that tool and the size and scale of their projects. And then finally, the legislation builds on the Department of Energy standards setting efforts and requires an additional 2.5 yearly reduction in energy use, resulting in overall 25% reduction in energy use. So what is next? Well, the bill passed out of the Senate last month after 4 committee hearings and compiling 114 different bills. We're waiting on the House to see what's next. They passed their energy bill in December 2015. And we kind of had a bumpy ride as well. Our bill initially passed out of committee in July, but because of some issues, there were some provisions around the Flint water crisis that stalled it for a couple of months. We finally got ours passed. And the next step is to have a conference to work out the differences between the Senate and the House committee to get one full bill for full congressional consideration. And of course, Senator Cantwell will continue to advocate for energy workforce programs in the overall bill. She's looking forward to continuing to work with you to help get this bill across the finish line. And if anyone has any feedback or input, I'll be around here for most of the afternoon. Please feel free to get in touch, and I'm happy to pass those along to Senator Cantwell. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think that leads up to a great kickoff for Matt Morrison, who's the Executive Director of the Pacific Northwest Economic Region. This is a statutory public-private nonprofit created jointly by 5 states, Alaska, Idaho, Oregon, Montana, and Washington, and 5 Canadian provinces. I've had the pleasure of working with Penwar on multiple different workforce development, and then most recently the Energy and Environment Workforce Committee, which is really looking at, as a region, how can we work together to come to net zero in our energy efficiency of buildings, and what are we going to need to do that is a really skilled workforce that can work in these more automated systems and ensure that the buildings are running at capacity for which they're built. So this organization, I strongly recommend anybody reaching out, finding more about it. Really brings together leaders and policymakers around this so that we can make a real difference. So with that.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here. Thank you to everyone here. Both Barbara and Shana have been incredibly active in our workforce as well as our energy working group. Penwar is a unique organization. It's 25 years old, formed or chartered by the legislatures of Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, and Alaska, and then Alberta, British Columbia, Saskatchewan, the Yukon, and Northwest Territories. So together, as if this were a country, it's the 11th largest economy in the world, over $1 trillion GDP, and 22 million people. So our goal is to share best practices and to look strategically at linking our R&D institutions, also trying to understand how we can connect the assets, the innovation assets in our region, because it's an astounding area. And we have a lot of great best practices. So Penwar has 22 different working groups. Basically, I'm going to talk about 2 major things today. One is the changing landscape in our utility system. Our energy working groups have put together over the last maybe 20 years. We have energy chairmen in the state legislative energy committees and the energy ministers in Canada. And they have regular meetings and have developed different programs. And we've spent a lot of time looking at the changing landscape in the utility business. So I'll talk about that. And the second major thing is the move to net zero building construction. And we're working on a program to look at specific examples, policy examples that can move the region toward ultra-low energy use buildings, both retrofits of existing buildings and how do we get there with new construction. And on your table is a little pamphlet about that. We're in the midst of looking at best practices in all 10 jurisdictions to create a white paper for policymakers. So I'll talk about that. The electrical grid system, I'm sure many of you know, is in transition. And we're going from a volumetric pricing model, which is how most utilities are funded today, based on a standard kilowatt rate. And what I'm going to talk about briefly, and feel free to interrupt me with a question, because I know that we have a real broad audience here, and I'll try to keep it moving. So we're moving toward a smart grid, an integrated grid where power can move in two directions. So our energy legislators, and policymakers feel that in the next 5 to 7 years, things are going to change more than they have in 50 years. So what Ron said about looking forward, trying to understand where are we going is absolutely critical. There's so many new skills that are going to be needed, and this is being driven by the consumers. So the peak demand costs for electricity are sometimes 10, 20, 30, sometimes 40 times more than the base cost. So for the future integrated grid, when we can do real-time pricing to allow consumers to use less energy during the peak, it saves the whole system a lot of money. That's basically what we're looking at. So there's 3 basic areas: the time of use pricing, which a smart grid enables; demand-side response, where customers can reduce or shift their usage to off-peak times; and then there's a lot of other disrupting factors. Accelerated technological change, which we need a skilled workforce to understand; consumer preferences on green power, on reliability; different business model disruptions, where people are able to control their Internet of Things from their cell phone, and so on. So on a policy basis, there's at this point, no clear pathway forward how this is going to get resolved. And so, maybe some of the utilities here would take a different view, but basically there's two models that people are looking at. One is the transactive energy model. I'll talk a little bit about that, where customers can exchange information and energy across a smart grid. And you might say, I estimate that my solar panel is going to produce a megawatt of energy in a year, and we'll agree on a market price for that and exchange the amount I need over that, or if I don't produce that much, then there's a balancing initiative, or a performance-based model where consumers pay based on their values. I want green power. I want to make sure I have extra reliability or whatever. So in a new distribution system, all of these things have to be taken into account. People want energy storage. I visited the Elon Musk battery storage place in Nevada that they're just building, the largest building in the world, and they're predicting that people will install a large battery in their homes and be able to monitor and control their own energy usage, a microgrid in their home. Electric vehicles, all kinds of distributed generation, wind, solar, and this requires what Senator Cantwell is working on, a whole new set of digital tools and a grid that is responsive to those. So there have been a number of pilots, and what's, I think, really valuable here is we are one of the, if not the leader in these demonstration pilots. So I'd like to talk about the one that PNNL has done in a 4-state area here in the Northwest briefly. So it's how do we use this integrated grid to work on all of these different areas? So PNNL has done a Northwest demonstration project since 2010. It's involved 60,000 metered customers in 5 states, and it's really the only project of its type that's been done in the U.S. And it's brought about significant outcomes. I'll just touch on those. The purpose was to learn about how an integrated grid could function across political boundaries. That's one of the problems is our grid system doesn't necessarily respect our political boundaries, our counties, or cities, or even states. So you have to get beyond the political boundaries. How do we do the two-way communications? How do we measure costs and benefits? And ideally, the demonstration project was to really develop standards for an interoperable grid and to integrate renewable. So this particular involved PNNL, Bonneville, 11 different utilities, and they're listed here in the box, and then several technology infrastructure partners. Was based on a transactive model where distributed energy is coordinated based on where the power resides in the power system. And the most important thing is providing these incentive signals so that price forecasts can be sent to electricity assets. For example, tell your dryer don't go on unless the power is lower than a certain threshold. And in some of the pilots, they let homeowners just say, I want to save 15%. And then the box figured out at the time. They didn't have to say specific times. This was a really successful model, and it's given the Northwest an opportunity to really be a leader in this field. At the end of the project, 80 megawatts of distributed responsive assets were engaged. $80 million of base smart grid equipment was installed in 11 different utilities. So this is, there's a lot more information you could get about this, but it's one of the successes nationwide and especially covering 5 states. So in this context, the challenges we have, number one, regulations for utilities come from the utility commissions. Utility commissions are creatures of the legislature, and we've had a number of meetings with utility commissions and our legislative leaders, and it's clear that utility commissions are risk averse. They don't want to step outside of the box. It's really up to the legislatures to understand what's going on and to make policy decisions that give the utility commissions an opportunity to go into this area. So also, as I mentioned, the geographic boundaries don't we have to go beyond the political boundaries. And these are very complex systems. So what, because we've been addressing this at Penwar, and the energy chairmen are agonizing over sitting in their committee where someone is a flower shop owner or a farmer one day, and the next day they're sitting there trying to evaluate a very, very complex piece of legislation. We created the Legislative Energy Horizon Institute, and this is a 60-credit course that we've been operating now for 10 years, and it's a collaborative effort between the U.S. Department of Energy and the University of Idaho that has a utility executive program where they put utility executives through a 3-week intensive. And what we do is work with, it started as a pilot in the Pacific Northwest, and DOE said, this is so great, you've got to make it nationwide. So we took on a partner of the National Conference of State Legislators, and Penwar runs this now for the whole nation, for U.S. and Canada. And some of you probably know Jeff Morris, Representative Morris, who chairs the Economic Development Committee in the House in Olympia. He directs the program on behalf of Penwar. And it's really a boot camp. It's very intense. There's 3.5 days in Richland at the PNNL campus, and then 3.5 days in Washington, D.C., where we hear from national leaders from DOE and EPA and Congress and so on. We cover lots of these things. And in particular, over the last 2 years, we've had a lot of dialogue about the Clean Power Plan. How is it going to be implemented? NARUC, the National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissions, comes in and does a fantastic game where, like in this room, each table of 5 people, you get a board and you have a scenario, okay? You have so much coal, so much wind, so much hydro. So, okay, now we're looking 10 years out. You've got to deal with 111D of the Clean Power Plan. What are you going to do? And it's computerized. So they meet we mix up these legislators, and they all meet and figure out what they're going to do. And then the button goes off, and up on the screen, it says, okay, here's what your ratepayers are going to pay, table 1. You just doubled your rate based on your decisions. Number 2, the reliability, you're going to have brownouts tomorrow. and we go through several different scenarios and do this over and over again. And this is at the end of the course, so they have a chance to really think about all of these policy issues that we've been talking about, and come to understand how utilities and how energy generators and how the private sector, how they make decisions, why stability in the policy arena is so important. These are some of our graduates. As you see, they come from all over the country. Our Washington alumni are listed here. So we've had a number of Washington State alumni go through this course. It's a very intense course, and we have now, I think, 7 alumni who are energy chairmen around the country. And anyway, our alumni have really gone on to do a lot of energy policy work. We're working toward net zero buildings by 2030, and the goal is to really look at find existing models in each of our jurisdictions, and then get several legislators and industry leaders in each state and province to develop a strategy for moving this out in the policy arena. And what we want to do is get to carbon neutral buildings, both moving toward retrofitting buildings, which is just a huge opportunity for our workforce and also for our economy. as well as ordinances and policy developments for new construction. So we are working with local governments, public utilities, professional associations, architects, builders, to understand what their concerns are and try to develop a series. We're trying to make a blueprint, a roadmap to the future, roadmap to 2030. How do we get there? And we're going to be launching a white paper at our annual summit in Calgary this summer in July 19. And we would appreciate input from any of you here. What we know is that there's tremendous savings, not only to consumers, but also to our whole energy system. And the magnitude of those savings is massive. And we want our policymakers to be able to see that. If we implement this policy, this is how much energy we'll save. This is how much our economy will grow. This is how many jobs it will create. Those are the outcomes. We want measurable outcomes here. So I guess that's it. Let me stop for questions.
The LEHI,
Lehigh, we call it. Yeah.
Lehigh program, has that ever been opened up to anyone outside of legislators?
Well, we're actually thinking about that. The utility commissioners are sending staff now. The Western governors have sent. We've had 3 of the governor energy leads go through the program, and we are open to municipalities as well. It's possible, but here's the greatest thing that happens is you got 40 legislators, and I'm there. They say it's so great not to be on TV. I can ask a stupid question. I mean that they don't ask questions in the hearings. So this, not only are they getting a really base. I mean, this guy Skip Collier does the electricity thing with he does a day and a half, and it's good. And then we walk into one of the generation. We're right there at PNNL. We go up into a windmill, and we go to a dam and see a generator, and they understand single phase, 3-phase, AC, DC. It's great. I mean, anyway, it is great. But what's nice is they get this whole thing all together. We have a legislator from Kentucky with California. And then they've been through the whole program, and now we're talking clean power plant. And they all know that everyone knows what they know. And the dialogue is fantastic. Okay, any last questions?
Yeah,
yes,
I have
sir.
a question about how PennWARC gets involved in the issues of, we have utilities like Seattle City Light, Tacoma, which have very, very clean energy, almost 100% hydro and low carbon, and we have other utilities rely much more on natural gas and others. How does PennWARC envision sort of balancing this regional goal of being lower carbon or more energy efficient, and getting folks in Seattle to conserve energy, even though they're not really using, don't have a carbon intensive utility at this point?
Great question. And it's all about relationships. I mean, this legislative session, I had 5 senators from Montana who are all graduates of Lehigh. So they all came over to testify in the Senate and the House committee about the bill to shut down Colstrip in eastern Montana. And we put together an all-day meeting with Dave Danner to sit down and really look at how do we deal with this. And because of Lehigh, they knew each other and they were friends. That was so helpful. Anyway, it's not easy. And it's a changing landscape. So But we had this one assemblywoman from San Francisco, and her testimony at the end of Lehigh was, I am so glad I got to meet this guy from Kentucky, because I didn't have any idea what these people are like, who are totally into coal. This guy had never, he's the chair of the Energy Committee in Kentucky, never been on a plane in his life. He came to Richland. That was his first plane ride. Anyway, but it was a great opportunity for dialogue. So no answer to you, but we try through deeper understanding. Okay, thank you very much.